Turned On. I'm your host, Tiffany Anton. I'm a psychotherapist specializing in sex and relationships. I hope to help you get turned on in life as well as inside of your bedroom. Hello, welcome to Tiffany Turned On. I am so excited about the guest that I have today, and I hope you enjoy it just as much as I am. Luckily, I met up with Sophia, who came from out of town to meet with me. She is in the process of writing a book in regards to what it's been like to sleep with 100 married men. So welcome so much to the show, Tiffany Turned On, Sophia.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for having me.
Thinking about the book, Sleeping with 100 Married Men, did you go through this via Ashley Madison? What brought you to the accessibility of meeting married men? What kind of was your main website or the main way of selecting married men?
Ashley Madison was absolutely my main website, and I say main in that I didn't even know about other websites for a while, or I didn't use any other websites.
Ashley Madison is a dating site aimed at people who are already married. The service brands itself as discreet. Now, I'll talk more about the email hack or breach that occurred in 2015. Yet this site was launched in 2001 by Toronto native Noel Biederman. And the main tagline is, "Life is short, have an affair." The website offers affair guidelines with advice on how to cover your tracks. They chose the name Ashley Madison based upon the most popular names in the year 2000 and 2001. In its defense, Noel Biederman says that someone wouldn't go to Ashley Madison unless they were already planning on having an affair. We're discussing in today's podcast a newly divorced single woman chose the site Ashley Madison. We will learn more as to what led her to this choice, how her marital experience affected her decision.
You asked if that's how I came to be with 100 Married Men. I will say that not all of them were married, but they might have had complicated lives. Most were married.
And what brought you to check out Ashley Madison? Because there are a variety of dating sites out there.
So it's interesting because, this was never an intent to just go out and date, certainly not 100 married men, or I was looking to connect with someone. I was at the end of my marriage, not physically removed from my house yet, sleeping in separate bedrooms. We were trying to figure things out. I had briefly gotten involved with a man who was single and in the area that I met, and it was just happenstance. He demanded a lot of my time, and he wanted a lot more from me than I could give, having a minor child still at home. That relationship went sour for many reasons, but he couldn't understand that I couldn't just jump out of the household yet. That was ending, and interestingly enough, I was on an unrelated message board. One of those members was, and it was off the topic of what the message board was even for, but it was a snarky comment about cheating and cheaters, and evidently there's a market for it, and she puts a link. And I'm thinking, that's it. Married men, if they're wanting to just, have a very casual relationship, wouldn't be putting that kind of pressure on me that caused me pain and agony of hurting this other person who was totally available and wanted more. So it was kind of an accident. I had never heard of Ashley Madison before. I clicked the link and filled out a profile.
You mentioned that you had been previously married. How long were the two of you together?
At that point, we dated for 4 years, and we were married, not totally divorced yet, for right about 25 years.
So you were in a long-term relationship for 25 years. When you married that individual, did you agree upon monogamy initially?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, up until about the 25-year mark in my marriage, I had been totally monogamous, and in fact only had ever had sex with my husband. I know.
Wow.
I know.
I think that would be listeners' kind of unexpected learning about you, that you were in this long-term relationship and you maintained the monogamy. It sounds as if the end of your marriage, you guys had worked on it, but you were starting to live separate lives. And during the phase of living separate lives, that's when you met this other gentleman?
Correct. I think it's an important part of my story that I was monogamous. What I would consider, I grew up a good girl, a rule follower. I believed, I wasn't quite a virgin at the altar, but I believed in that and, didn't quite make it. Nevertheless, I was with one man and we were already engaged at that point. A lot of my story had to do with the dissolution of my marriage and the way it went down. And in the beginning of our relationship, I was nowhere near as sexual, having been a good girl and having lots of guilt thrown on me from my family and church. And toward the end, after having done some own work on myself and therapies, I became more sexual. So my husband was not. He didn't change. I changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized, absolutely, I am the one that changed, but nevertheless, I changed. So when we got married, he was the man I needed, the not very sexual man, the one who didn't really want much in the way of sex. But as time grew on, I wanted more, and it was one of many differences in our marriage by that point.
I was interested in asking you the question, when did you decide to expand your sexual experiences, whether that was during the marriage or after? What I'm hearing from you is that it was actually after you had a sexual experience at the end of your marriage, and you felt a lot of pressure from that individual. You learned about Ashley Madison and thought this would be a way for you to date some men without any preconceived notions of the next step of what could happen.
True.
That the pressure would be low, yet you could continue to explore your sexual self, which it sounds as if was really repressed in your earlier age and even repressed in the marriage.
Yes, I would say that's correct. There was a pivotal moment at the end of my marriage, and I don't need to go into the argument or the words said, but the words were, becoming more and more often. It hurt me so much, and it had to do with no matter what the fight was about, what ended up being the gotcha moment at the end was more about sex. And the comment made was, "And you wonder why I never touch you anymore." And in that moment, it was just so palpable. I remember thinking, I'm never going to cry over you again. You're not going to hurt me like that anymore. You know what? Next time I have any inkling that I would have a man interested in me, I would go for it at that point. It's funny how the mind works, because I really didn't have, or at least I didn't consider any opportunities before, so maybe I didn't think I had them. That opportunity was really just within a few weeks of that.
When he made this negative comment to you, which was really sexual shaming,
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you had told him or disclosed the affair, or he discovered it? Or was this comment relatively out of the blue?
The comment was prior to any affair at all, prior to any stepping out at all. And I say stepping out in that we were already in separate rooms. That was it. That was the end, because divorce was discussed in that one too. And it was, okay, that's fine. That's it. It was in response to my expressing desire for wanting a little more out of the marriage than we had. Could we try this? Maybe even go to therapy, try some things to work on our marriage. Because he didn't have any real answers, I think that was his way of shutting down the rest of the argument. And you wonder why I never you're so demanding, you're so whatever. I don't even know what I could attach to that, but it was the moment I knew in my head it was over. No more even trying to work on it.
Now, when you were married, actively married, what was your frequency of sex, if you think about per week, per month, or even per year?
25 years is a long time, and things can change. So initially, maybe once or twice a week, 3, maybe by the end, 2-3 times a year.
Would you guesstimate then, like the last 5 years of your marriage or even 10 years of your marriage, that it was 2 to 3 times per year?
Yes.
And what about regular affectionate touch? So that's hand-holding, hugging, snuggling, pet kissing. Was there any affectionate touch? I'm really hearing a sexless marriage.
Yes.
But I'm wondering about the affectionate side of it, if that maintained.
There would be peck kissing, in greetings, hello and goodbye, in and out the door. Some affection as far as maybe a handhold, but not too often. I think a lot of that too was not even desired by me when someone is, I'm going to speak for myself. There was a lot of bitterness in those last years that doesn't really promote affection. And then maybe if there were more affection, there wouldn't be the bitterness. So I believe that's a vicious cycle. And it's a lot of the things I've learned since then. In one thing that it's not always one directional. It's a cycle.
What you just described to me, it would make sense for you to be affectionate starved and erotically starved. And if you were able to shift from more of a repressive sexuality to expressive sexuality, I would assume that once you divorced, you had a feeling of freedom.
I did. But a lot of for several reasons, the divorce, even though I had finally moved out, the divorce itself, which to me at that point was a technicality, there were pockets of feeling real freedom.
When you got on the Ashley Madison site, did you think about any other dating sites?
I did not. At that point, because of that affair with the single man, I didn't think of any other, I didn't even search out for any other sites. I just thought that was my best option for my situation.
I can merely guess as to how the response would have been for you to put yourself out there, because you're obviously an attractive woman. What was that like for, putting the profile out there, and what kind of responses did you receive?
Reportedly from men that I would meet, they rarely got responses back. They felt like there were not many real women out there. And there weren't many female profiles to choose from in the first place.
Okay.
So when you have one female to 100 or so, and no pun intended on the 100, but I don't know what the proportion or the ratio is.
Okay.
But when there's a far greater amount of men, you're going to get inundated with just hellos even.
Mm-hmm.
Even just going through profiles to even figure out who you want to respond to, who seems interesting, is it's time consuming, as a matter of fact.
I think it would be a little bit of an ego boost.
Of course, no doubt. And especially, as you said, coming from, feeling affectionately starved and sexually starved and just really kind of put down a lot anyway, it was an absolute ego boost.
I'd ask what brought you to Ashley Madison, and I feel like I have a decent understanding as to what you were looking to gain. My assumption then is that you were looking to gain erotic experiences with men who wouldn't pressure you into more than being erotic partners.
True. I did also look for having some sort of bond, not a bond of real relationship, but at least a friendship, maybe that you talk about some other things from time to time. There might have been texting and messaging, and it wasn't always of sexual content. I was also kind of starved for the relationship too.
That's one of the questions I had for you. Is it in the affairs that you have had, did it remain mostly on the sexual level? Were many of them friends of yours? Did any of them actually want more from you?
Yes to all of the above. So cover some of them. There were some experiences that were, we'll call it a one-time event, one-night stand, however you want to put that. There were some that were more than that, and there was a level of friendship. I had a handful of relationships along the way that lasted longer.
Relationships with the men on Ashley Madison or single men?
On Ashley Madison. One in particular also was single, didn't live in the area, but had full custody of his child.
Do you have any contact still with the men that you developed friendships with?
There is some limited, a text of happy birthday, or, I saw this and reminded me of you. I'm friends with at least a handful that I can think of on Facebook, and, then phone numbers stay. So yes, but nothing regular or, ongoing.
Because there's the difference between, the one-night stands, which I often call flings,
mm-hmm.
and then there are regular lovers, And then there are affairs. And so that really takes us to not only the sexual piece and friendship piece, but a very strong emotional connection. How did you cope with having some level of detachment? In one of my other podcasts, I talk about the role of oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical. And I make a joke about Samantha in Sex and the City, and she had frequent lovers, yet seemed to be detached from them. What kind of mechanisms did you put in place when you were having good sex with multiple men so that you weren't falling head over heels for them?
I didn't have any plan in action of not becoming attached specifically. If you take a look at this from dating in general, if you take marriages out of it and you're dating, and some people you click with more than others, whether you've had sex with them or not, you're going to connect on other levels. I will tell you there were some men that I did become quite attached to, and the relationship was more than just sexual.
Did any men request for you to stay with them long term?
There were some that were a long-term relationship.
And what's been the longest term affair that you have experienced to this point?
I would say one was in the vicinity of 3 years and another about 4.5.
When you were being sexual with these other men in Ashley Madison, were you disclosing to them you were open to other people and that you were sexually active with others at the same time that you were dating them?
Well, it's interesting because in the times I was involved with those few that were longer term, I actually wasn't having sex with other men. I was true to them, but they all had different specifics. And I'm just talking about the ones that were longer term, that became something more than just a fling.
When you engaged in these longer term affairs, did you close your Ashley Madison account or just ignore responses?
I usually put it on, you didn't delete it, you hid it. And so no one could contact you, and I would hide it and then reopen it.
So you would hide your profile on Ashley Madison so other men didn't realize that you were accessible.
True.
Did any of the men that you had longer term relationships with make that request, or was that based upon your interest?
2 specifically did request me to shut it down.
So that you could be their sole lover or their sole
Yes.
side, their sole side. What word would you use? Or mistress sometimes has a real derogatory meaning.
We'll just go with soul lover.
Okay.
I wasn't offended by any term.
What were you wanting to gain from this experience? So you've had some more longer term partnerships with these men, yet we covered what prompted you or motivated you to open the account. What were you looking to gain?
Ahead of the experience, it was really more of I honestly didn't have a lot of forethought of what I wanted to gain. In other words, I wasn't one who sat down and wrote out my goals for what I want to get out of it. I guess, at a very basic level, I wanted to have some connection with a man that would be casual, not too demanding. I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be good. I wasn't opposed to it being long term, or running its course is maybe even the better word.
Charles Orlando, who is a relationship expert, best-selling author, and has the website theproblemismen.com, wrote a very popular article titled, "I Went Undercover on Ashley Madison to Find Out Why Women Cheat." It was part of his research into why women cheat, why infidelity is increasing, and what can be done to possibly affair-proof a marriage. He reports the advent of the internet has made having an illicit affair easier than ever before. His hypothesis was simple. Women were looking for an extramarital affair with another married man were looking to connect in some way. If both parties were married, they not only started on even ground, but they had something in common. They were missing something from their current relationship, and he needed to uncover the motivations behind starting and maintaining an affair. In this article, he gives examples of feedback he received from a handful of women that he contacted through the site Ashley Madison. In his date with Shannon, as they talked more, it was clear that she wanted to laugh, to live, and to love. In dating Lisa, her profile stated that she wasn't sure what she wanted from being a member of Ashley Madison, yet upon getting to know her, She longed for spontaneity, the freshness that accompanies new relationships, and the effort that her husband had put in 10 years prior. Charles Orlando states, "First, there isn't one type of woman looking to cheat online. Some were looking to have sex, period. Others were looking to subsidize their current relationship with a human connection, and if it led to sex, even better. But all were clear that they were not leaving their current relationships. They just wanted to feel what they used to feel from the man in their life. The most common complaint was a lack of passion and effort." He surmises at the end that men in established relationships and marriage need to remember that women are women first and foremost, and wives and mothers second. If a man stops bringing passion and effort into his relationship and stops treating her as a desired woman, he shouldn't be surprised when she feels forced to fill her needs elsewhere. Did you have an experience that you met up with a man through the site and it didn't end up with sex?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I met for coffee with, several men or a drink, sometimes lunch, but usually I'd keep it to a shorter meeting. Very often didn't feel any kind of connection, or they weren't quite how they presented themselves to be by picture. Maybe the photo was several years old and it just wasn't there. So absolutely, I certainly turned down.
What did you enjoy most out of having these multiple affairs?
Touched on something earlier. It was certainly an ego boost, but for the first time, I felt absolutely no guilt in having sex, which is ironic because my whole life prior to that, I grew up with beliefs and standards, and you just don't. And I was guilty even when I was married and having sex and enjoying it early on, which is one of the reasons I had to go through some therapy for myself. So to not have any guilt, to purely enjoy it, just revel in a man that was into me, even if it was for an hour. And certainly there are some out there that are into it for themselves, but it's powerful. It feels good. It was an escape. I'd meet interesting people. That's another part of it, is you just meet a diverse group of people that way too.
Typically, where would you meet the men? Would you meet at maybe one of their secret apartments, at a hotel? Would you allow the men into your home?
I never brought it into my home, but meeting was usually coffee or a drink. I mean, as far as meeting, because specifically meeting for sex, most of the time, 90% of the time was a hotel room.
In meeting the 100 married men, you're saying that you would first meet them for coffee or a drink, and then you would decide whether or not it was going to be mutually erotic.
Yes.
And once you both decided that it was going to be sexual, you would meet with them. I heard you would not bring them back into your home. So what was the norm?
Most of the time, it was a hotel room. Occasionally, if it happened to be a man who was single, or in my area of town for work, on business. Sometimes, they either were in a hotel or in a temporary apartment.
In the men that you met, did you ever learn later that any of them were discovered or disclosed what they had done and it had created an effect on their marriage?
I did, too, for sure. A longer term, and not one of the ones that I've mentioned. It was, we were together about a year. He seemed always very cavalier about, even if he got caught, and kind of didn't care, as he would put it. But you never know what you'll do until that happens. So when he was found out, we broke it off. But I know that he was working on it until about 3 months later. He caught his wife having an affair.
So when you say the word working on it, does that mean that he ended the sexual relationship with you and started focusing on repairing the marriage?
Yes, exactly. I don't know if they went to therapy. I don't know that part. We broke off contact, and reportedly later when I spoke to him, because we've seen each other one time in about 5 or 6 years since that all took place. And it wasn't even sexual. There just happened to be a meetup for coffee. Then when he caught his wife herself cheating, who reportedly did it to see what that was like.
Mm-hmm. To either explore herself or spitefulness?
I would say either or both, and we don't know because I don't know. I just found it interesting, and I became a little cynical about this particular person, maybe a lot cynical about this particular person specifically, that who reportedly to me all along hadn't cared if he got caught, did then care, worked on it. She cheated, and that was it.
That was it in
It's
regards of your
hypocritical.
contact with them, or that was it for their marriage? In regards of you having any further contact with him, or did his marriage end?
His marriage ended.
His marriage ended. A study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships in April of 2001 showed that there are 4 ways that affairs typically come to light. There is unsolicited partner discovery. The partner who had the affair admits to it without prior interrogation from his or her spouse. And solicited partner discovery. The partner who had the affair admits to it only after being suspected and questioned by the spouse. Then there is the red-handed discovery. A spouse catches his or her partner in the act of infidelity. And unsolicited third-party discovery. A spouse is told about a partner's affair by another person. Now let's add the 5th way, and that is July 2015 hack of Ashley Madison that revealed the personal information of more than 30 million registered users. And you had mentioned that there were 2 discoveries, and so you just shared one discovery. Is there anything you can share about the other one?
So the gentleman that I was just referring to that was a bit cavalier about getting caught, it's interesting that he is one of the men that had asked me to take my profile down. We were committed to each other as an affair goes, so to speak.
What about the second individual that you said had been caught, or whether or not he revealed to his spouse?
Well, the second man that I know of that got caught, I was no longer in contact with, was caught because of the Ashley Madison.
The 2015 email hacking that released the mass amount of email identities of individuals who had an account.
I think that information was linked to if you had used a credit card and spent money. That's how they had your name.
So it wasn't necessarily the email, it was based upon the credit card.
Yes, because most of those emails were not emails that they were using in their real life anyway.
Yeah, they were the fake emails. And I know that to have an account on Ashley Madison, you have to pay. Is the pay any different for men versus women? Do you know?
Well, you don't have to pay. You can be a free member, but when you're free, you can only respond to people who contact you. So women, I never paid for it. Men pay for credits so that they can contact women. So that was one of the reasons I was never really afraid of that break. I didn't think my name would ever be tied to it anyway.
I had mentioned before about the men that you were with getting caught or discovered. You just talked about the first man, who I want to name like Mr. Cavalier. What about the second situation?
The second situation was right after this break in leaking information from Ashley Madison. There was a story in the paper that I read. I instantly recognized through the details that this had to be a man that I had met a couple of years prior. Because of the break, he took his own life out of fear of getting caught by his community and his wife.
That is such a tragedy.
It is. The real tragedy was the things that I read about him. Actually, there were a lot of positive things written about him in the type of man he was and his involvement in his community and his family, and he was the guy that would help anyone. You could call him and he would show up to help. Very kind man, and he had also presented himself to me as a man who was very involved with his family, the raising of his children, loved his wife deeply, but basically sex-starved, and not just sex-starved, affection-starved, as we spoke before. One of the things I haven't really touched on yet, but many men were also starved for affection. I went back, read emails that I had saved from him. We met several times for coffee before we actually had sex. We did have sex once. He would write things like, even if we just, it could sound like a line, and one of the things about being on Ashley Madison is you kind of drop a lot of that pretense. Not that it's an automatic that you're going to have sex, but you don't have to feed a line in why you're there and want sex. Mm-hmm. It kind of drops all that out. And it actually kind of allows for much more real presentation of the other person. He wrote things to me like, even if you decide you don't want to have sex, I just need to cuddle someone. My experience with him sexually was very much similar to that. We did have sex, not all chemistry. Not everyone has chemistry, and that's all I can say about that. Nice man, kind man, considerate man. He was not there to just spend 15 minutes and walk out the door. He was there for an afternoon, and he wanted to cuddle. He wanted to hug. He wanted to stroke my hair. And not anything in a creepy way. I went back and I read these emails, and I was just so saddened by this man who was pouring his heart out to me, and then also recalling his words of what he really wanted. He loved his wife. He wasn't looking to leave. He didn't know how else to approach it for her to ever want to have sex with him or let him just be affectionate with her. I was by this time involved with, I will tell you, off of Ashley Madison and involved with the relationship I'm currently in that's been long term. Who knows all about everything I've done? We sat and held our own little private memorial for this man just by reading his emails, because there's no way I would ever have outed anybody or contacted anyone and said, but you have to hear the other side of the story. That would have done no good. I'm not looking to hurt anybody, but it saddened me to know that this man was crushed on the inside. Good people do things that they regret.
This reminds me of a previous podcast I had recorded, which is titled Infidelity in Marriage, based upon an article written in the New York Times. And her experience was that these men weren't looking for more sex or thrill-seeking sex, but were instead looking for any sex.
Some of that is true in my experiences, but I'll tell you there's also, and here's the important part of what I think one of the major lessons I learned out of all of my experiences. There were some men who maybe they had young children or things changed in the relationship. Maybe their wives were having some hormonal issues, or for whatever reason, their wives weren't necessarily turning them down for sex at all. There were men that would say, my wife lets me have sex with her, but that's it. She just lets me have sex with her. She doesn't want anything. She doesn't want my affection. She doesn't want my love and attention. She wants me to take 10 minutes and be done so she can move on to the rest of her day.
I consider that like pity sex, or the female viewing sex as a wifely duty or a task to complete.
Yes, these men want to be wanted.
Don't we all want to be wanted?
We all want to be wanted. And as women, we get wanted sort of not naturally, but if a man wants to be with us, he knows how to show us that he wants us. Women, I don't know that we have learned that. We're not supposed to do that, actually, by society's standards. And that is a huge lesson that I have taken from this, is men want to make love to a woman that they love. They want to shower her. Granted, there were a few cads out there that were not fitting this mold. But the majority, men, want to be wanted, and they want you to want what they have to give.
Did any of them share they wish to have these types of sexual experiences with their wives?
Yes, absolutely.
This is part 1 of a series entitled Sleeping with 100 Married Men. I hope you learned something surprising and understanding that really good people engage in affairs. There seems to be a need that was fulfilled by the site Ashley Madison, and I'm sure many others. Please stay tuned to part 2 of this series, which will be released next week. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please check it out, rate it, subscribe, and provide a written review on iTunes. Stay tuned in to Turn On. The music for Tiffany Turned On is provided by Kumasi Afrobeat. If you're interested in more of their music, you can find them online at kumasiafrobeat.com. KUMASIAFROBEAT.com. They are New Orleans' full Afrobeat band. They play to make you move. If you liked what you heard in today's episode and you want to learn more about me, check out my website at neworleanssextherapy.com. I also have a TED Talk entitled I Love Pleasure from TEDx Vermilion Street.